Welcome everybody to the latest Wellingtone community event. Today we're going to be talking about your project management maturity journey by using or levering technology. So for that, I have with me Baz Khinda. Do you want to say hi, Baz?
Yes, hi, good morning everyone. My name's Baz Khinda, Commercial Director of Wellington and long-term Microsoft project consultant. And I've been working in PMO since around 2005.
Thanks Baz. Emma. For those of you that don't know me, if this is your first time, my name is Emma Arnaz-Pemberton. I'm the Director of Consulting Services at Wellingtone. So today, as I mentioned, we are going to be talking about your project management maturity. June is our maturity month, and today we're going to be focusing in a little bit onto technology. Let's get into it. So today we're going to explore PMO maturity and what that actually is from our perspective. We're going to identify some of the technology issues that PMOs are facing right now, and uncover how technology can help your PMO to evolve, as well as how to get started. So I'm going to be doing the first half of the session, and then Baz is going to come in and talk to you a little bit more about the technology side. So let's explore PMO maturity. When we look at maturity, there's a common myth or a set of common myths around the age or the type of PMO that you might have, and whether that makes it mature or not. Actually, the older the PMO is, it doesn't necessarily mean that that PMO is more mature. It is more mature from an age perspective, just like humans, we do mature with age, like a fine wine in some cases. But the older the PMO, we can find PMOs that have been around for a really long time and actually are quite immature when it comes to how they deploy the project management practice. The other myth that we see out there is strategic PMOs are better, they are more mature. And actually, again, what we find when I spend a lot of my time doing maturity assessments, looking at PMOs and project management, we do tend to find that PMOs who are strategic, maybe they're trying to be everything for everybody, it actually reduces their level of maturity over time because they're trying to do too much with too little. And also the other myth is that we have to have a very balanced approach to our PMO world, in that we have to be governing, strategic, tactical and supporting. And we have to have a perfect balance of these four things. But again, if we focus on trying to get a perfect balance, we're going to miss on what is the actual nature of our PMO and what is the reality. So for example, a PMO that reports into the CEO potentially is very strategic and can be in that, if we call it the room for strategy, and really developing and helping to define the direction of the business and supporting decision making. If we take a PMO that reports into the head of commercial, for example, that's a very different reality for that PMO. It's going to be much harder for that PMO to be perfectly strategic 25% of its time. So splitting the time between governing, strategic, tactical and supporting, actually what we need to do first is understand the nature of the PMO. So trying to get that perfect square, if you imagine a profile, will make you less mature in certain circumstances. So when we define maturity for PMO, we talk about maturity is about how well you deliver the services that are valued by your customers. We work, and I've seen very mature PMOs who have started to forget a little bit about the customers and the perception of value and being able to articulate why they exist and how they add value via the project management practice. And that has actually led them to reducing their level of maturity. So when we're thinking about maturity, we need to understand, okay, do I need to understand where I am? For me, I'm a firm believer of you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. So understanding why do we need to measure our maturity now is going to be really important. And there are lots of models out there from an organizational perspective. We have two of the most common ones. So there's the Axelos P3 M3, the program portfolios management maturity model. We are providers of that model. And there's also the OPM3, which is kind of the same, but has organizational management, organizational at the front. So they're looking at organizational measurements. So that's really looking at how well do you as an organization do resource management. At the other end of the scale, we have individual measurement and individual frameworks available. So the APM, the Association for Project Management, which is the chartered body for our profession, they have a competence framework that you can access to understand how you are performing as an individual across a bunch of 28 competencies. There's also the NISTA, which used to be the Infrastructure Projects Authority and has recently changed names. They also have a competence framework, as well as the International Project Management Association. So they will answer the question, how are you performing as an individual? So what's missing is the PMO perspective. Okay, and what's interesting is that PMO, we know through our Wellingtone PMO principles that PMO is an integrator. We bring together people, data, knowledge, wisdom, systems, so that we can develop a good project management practice. But none of these models answer how does the PMO enable resource management. So that's why it's important to not just understand organizationally or as individuals how we are performing, but why we need to start thinking about the PMO. In terms of the why, so we've talked about the why now, but then why measure? To make sure that we have data that's driven by best practice. So if you need a case for change, we want to develop or transform our PMO or our project management practice. It's rare for us to get that business case signed off if it's just an opinion. So providing data that's driven and informed by best practice, that's aligning your method with your practice, which is identifying what are our strengths and what are our opportunities, that gives you that case for change. It gives you an independent view and a roadmap. And you can see here at a basic level, we start with the strategy. Where are we today? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? And then we always loop back around to make sure that you understand and are able to articulate how well did you do? What's your particular story? In terms of measuring PMO, there are certain things you have to consider. First of all, do we have the right practices in place? Do we have the right people in place? Do we have the right processes in place? And do we have the right context? Are we looking externally enough to understand how things are impacting our case for change? And the other thing is capability. And for our PMO pathway learners, and particularly the PMO practitioner course, we define capability as a combination of knowledge, skills, and behavior. So the competence of your people versus how much bandwidth do they have to actually be able to take on a big change, such as transforming or creating a PMO from scratch. So capability has to be a combination of both. You can't have capability if you don't have bandwidth. So thinking about how we measure maturity, why we need to measure maturity, and how then technology can help us. From a PMO perspective, the technology story at the moment is very interesting. So our latest state of project management research shows that most organizations do not have access to real-time centralized KPIs. The impact of that is that 14 of us are still planning using Microsoft Excel, with 11% of us not having any project management solution at all. How that manifests itself is in we're spending a day a month, if not more, actually collating project reports and manipulating data. So 42% of the people who have responded to our latest research spend more than that time. Is that you? Could you fix that with looking at technology and levering A, what you already have, but B, what's out there that is continually evolving that Baz is going to show you? And finally, from me, some fun facts. First of all, one of the key myths is, well, we need to be really mature in order to buy a system. Not true. It is important that you understand what you want the tool to do. So, if you're completely ground zero, just take a little bit of time in terms of your requirements to understand how are we going to develop our framework that we can then build a tool around that. It's much harder to take a tool and then try and retrofit your way of working into it. So it's important that we can at least talk to, these are the key things I wanted to do. And a lot of systems, the one that Baz is going to show you, has what we would say is a best practice approach. So if you're starting from zero, you can put in a best practice approach that you can evolve over time. And that can do a number of different things. One is it can kind of enforce a little bit of discipline. If you're struggling with getting discipline and engagement, we can kind of say, well, the tool does this in this way. And so it can actually enforce a little bit of discipline into the practice. It will also provide a common language. It's much harder for people to interpret in their own way how and what they should be saying and what the next step should be, because the system will kind of guide them. It's a bit of a roadmap in itself. And it also makes project management repeatable. So if you're in an organization that has a lot of accidental project managers, maybe not professional project managers, maybe they struggle to understand what the next step is, then the tool can actually help to make that repeatable, and therefore over time giving those people confidence that they can work within those structures. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Baz, who's going to talk a little bit more about the technology solution. But I feel it's important that you keep these things in mind, that it isn't, quite often people will say you need to be mature to buy a tool, but actually the tool can help to be a catalyst for your particular maturity journey.
Thank you very much, Emma. And that's exactly what I was going to say, that often a PMO solution can be the catalyst to help you on that journey of increasing your maturity over time. And I'm going to dive into my slides now. So I will, in the next 5 or so minutes, jump into a live demonstration of the latest version of Microsoft Project / Planner and the Wellingtone Accelerator Plus. But look, just reiterating some of the things that Emma's already said, these are the typical activities that are undertaken by a PMO, and these are the largest challenges. And the key one for me at the very end is a lack of appropriate software. And if you've got the right software in place, set up in the right way, then I would argue through experience, we can also address all of these challenges that are currently highlighted. And again, this research coming from the State of Project Management 2025 report. I think my colleague Hannah has dropped the link in to the chat window. So if you've not read the report, it is worthwhile to take a look. Now, I want to share this really good quote. It is better to take many small steps in the right direction than to make a great leap forward only to stumble backwards. And this is really key because a lot of the time I do see organizations documenting some really complex, over-engineered processes because they think that's how the ideal PMO or project function should operate. And then they try and retrofit all of those requirements into a software solution. And typically what you end up with is something that's vastly over-engineered and way too complex to entice anybody to go and use it. And as a result, you've invested the time and effort to get something deployed, but people don't want to use it. And well, what good is that? That's no good at all. You're back at square one. So take small steps. And with that in mind, we'd always recommend a phased deployment of any solution. And just because a solution has a lot of functionality within it, typically you'd hide the features that you don't want to use. And at the beginning, actually, what you'd want to do is define your implementation roadmap. And this is where you would define the biggest challenges you've got, prioritize them, recognizing that you can't boil the ocean in one day. So phase one, you might simply want people to get better at planning and scheduling their projects. You might want the PMO heads or other senior management to get centralized visibility of all of the data in one place. That could be phase one. Phase two, this is where you might try and embed in a bit of governance stage gate process. You might want to get better at resource loading your plans and getting that visibility of demand versus capacity out of the tool, all in one place. And phase three, this is where you might go a step above and start trying to prioritize your projects based upon strategic alignment or alignment against objectives and key results. And at this point, you might also want to embed something like risk management, issue tracking, and so forth. So your journey could look like this. It could be completely different. It's very much driven by your pain points. What are the burning platforms? What is it you need to have immediately versus what is a nice to have further down the line? So I'm going to talk now about the technology, and to set the scene, the solution that I'm going to be talking about primarily is the latest version of Project. It's called Microsoft Project for the Web, although there is some change on the horizon, and by September, Project for the Web is going to be rebranded into Planner for the Web. And the biggest difference is really going to be obviously the name change, but It's also going to bring about Copilot integration directly within the schedule. I might get a chance to show you some of that today. If not a problem. My contact details will be shared a bit later, and I'm more than happy to provide any offline demos. What's really good about Planner for the Web is that as a solution by itself, it's great at helping you move away from Excel so that you can start creating basic project plans all within a centralized, unified, dedicated project management solution. And it's where you can go in, create your schedules, you can add tasks, you can do some basic resource loading, but by layering on top the Wellingtone Accelerator Plus, which is built using the Microsoft Power Platform, you can do the types of things that are being displayed on screen. And again, just because it's got all of its capability out of the box, for many customers, we would typically dial it down. We might hide a good 50 to 60% of the core features with a plan to switch them on at a later point as and when maturity increases. So a couple of key points here. The Accelerator Plus, that extends Planner for the Web to provide you with an AI-ready PMO solution. It's something that can be customized and extended. What I'm going to demonstrate today is very much a generic build of the solution itself. It's also something that's deployed inside of your Microsoft 365 tenant. And this is another important point. If you are using Microsoft 365 within your organization, but you are then also using other third-party solutions like Monday.com, Asana, Smartsheet, I would question why, because all of that capability is available natively within the M365 tenant. But anyways, getting back onto point, the Accelerator Plus Planner for the Web, it only requires native Microsoft licensing. And if you belong to a larger organization that's maybe public sector, larger private enterprise, the chances are you've already got some of these licenses in place. And I'd strongly encourage you to go and speak to somebody in licensing or IT within your organization to find out what you've got. And again, once you know you've got the licenses, you can start making use of them. Okay, that's going to bring me on to the live demonstration. Now, bearing in mind the current time, this is not going to be an exhaustive end-to-end demonstration of the tool, but I am going to demonstrate some key concepts that we've already talked about. So getting centralized visibility, getting all of your plans in one location. We'll have a bit of a look at risk management as well. And maybe we'll touch upon one or two other things, such as stage gate governance process. And importantly, I'll also demonstrate what the reporting outputs look like. So here we are within Microsoft 365. We are looking at the Accelerator Plus Power App. And if I was to click on that waffle, it would show me all of my other M365 apps. This view, though, is a window into the solution. It provides me with a bit of a dashboard into the portfolio that I'm engaged with. But before we look at some of that portfolio-related data, here we've got some navigation tiles. I can also see some metrics linked to my profile. And just by looking at all these metrics and these charts and dials and upcoming milestones, again, we're getting visibility in one location, something that you wouldn't ordinarily have, especially if you're using a multitude of spreadsheets that are scattered everywhere. Or other disjointed solutions. But nevertheless, we've got really good visibility into the portfolio right there. But if I open up the menu on the left-hand side, we'll also notice we've got a pipeline view. It's where brand new ideas, new work requests can be submitted. It's where you might invite people to build business cases. It's where they might also demonstrate strategic alignment. But again, all of that information being captured in one location. And what we're able to do then is compare apples for apples, because all of the data has been captured in a consistent way. We also provide live portfolio views, program views, individual views of projects as well, which I'll go into in just a few seconds. We've also got automated reporting, standardized reporting in Power BI. It's standardized, but it's also created automatically on the fly at whatever frequency you set in the background. And we've got a full suite there of all of our RAID log items and other management artifacts. So again, the key thing here that everything is in the same environment, same location, and it's very easy to then roll up all of this information into whatever format you want, be it reports, dashboards, or Word-based extracts. Going into the project view, this again continues that theme of getting that centralized live view of all of your projects in one place. This is currently displaying all of my active projects, but I can also go in and look at a multitude of other views. I can also go in and edit the views that I get out of the box. So if I want to add additional columns and enrich those views, I can do that really easily. This is also linked to Microsoft Teams, and anytime you see a person's name being displayed, Against that, you'll also see presence information, which is coming in from Microsoft Teams. Drilling down into a project again, you can see that all of the data being captured centrally in a consistent way, and tying into the governance stage gate process that we signposted earlier, as well as seeing the project name. Beneath that, we see this lifecycle visualization. This particular project has got multiple stage gates, and what's even nicer is if I click into them, you will see these checklist items that we can bespoke as required. And again, going back to that conversation around maturity, sometimes at the beginning, an organization might turn around and say, look, we want to take small baby steps, get people to start collecting some of the detail, but we don't want to tie in lots of workflow governance process, because again, the more complicated something is on day one, the more change you're introducing, the less likely it is that people are going to use it. But things like this workflow, we can drop in at a later point. It doesn't have to be there on the first day of launch. Beneath that, I've also got these multitude of tabs. So again, really wide-ranging options that we can see there. Here at the bottom, I've got a general form where we can capture general details around the project. We can capture descriptions, define the project type, link items to portfolios, to programs, even business units, and we can also define who the project sponsors are as well. And talking of which, within this kind of tool, you can then make people accountable so that they know that they've got specific actions, certain responsibilities, and the tool will bring everyone together and ensure to a large extent that those actions are performed when they should be performed in the first place. We can also capture all of our cost information centrally. I'm going to let this load up really quickly. Outside of this, all of our documentation in one place as well. And that's just loading up. I'm going to be able to drill down. And we talked about risk management earlier. That's something that is often neglected. In fact, I've been in many organizations where the projects have no risks. And that might be because the process is maybe overcomplicated or just very disjointed to the overall delivery of the project, and it's been captured somewhere else. But here, risk log, all of the other logs, they're all captured centrally, and we can go in, onboard this information, and we can then extract this information as well when it comes to reporting. But if I open up Copilot now, yes, I've got some great data at an individual project level. I could even go in actually and view this information at the portfolio level. But what I can also do is leverage Copilot to get deeper insights. And this again is not the kind of thing you can do if you're using disjointed solutions. But here I'm going to go in and ask it to show me a list of risks without a mitigation plan. And I've made a real mashup of that spelling, but there we go. Show me a list of risks without a mitigation plan. 5 out of way. And by the way, I can assure you, but when I'm not presenting live, my spelling is impeccable. It's just on the rare occasion when I'm doing live demos. But it's now working on it, and you will see very soon Copilot is going to come back with our response. It's telling me that I've got 15 risks without a mitigation plan, and it does provide some notable examples there at the bottom. I can go and also display those all on a single page. Outside of this, I will demonstrate this really quickly. Everything that I've demonstrated so far can also be embedded directly within Teams as well. In fact, one of the things that I didn't show was the project plan. So here is the project plan loading up within Microsoft Teams. I can also view this directly within the Accelerator Plus solution as well. And I will very quickly go in just to demonstrate that by going into the same project that I had opened up earlier. So there's my task view there. And it doesn't matter if I edit it here, whether I edit it in Teams, it's all the same, all of the same underlying data. I can also go in and access the Accelerator Plus in its entirety within Microsoft Teams as well. Conscious of time, so I'll very quickly go to the reports. And rather than jumping straight into a detailed report, here's a menu of the various items that we can provide. So these are some of the standard reports we typically provide to customers when they first onboard with the solution. We don't have time to go into all of this. I am keen to move on to a bit of Q&A, but here we've got a live view of all of the portfolio items. And again, if I think about an organization that's got a low level of maturity, this kind of view typically is only pulled together by doing lots of manual copying and pasting of various spreadsheets or other artifacts that might exist in PowerPoint or Word. But here, all of the data comes directly from the source, that being Project for the Web or the Accelerator Plus. And the data, again, really wide ranging. Anything that we capture within the tool, we can absolutely pull out and report against and visualize as required within Microsoft Power BI. So I appreciate I've jumped around a tiny bit, but this again was a bit of a taster as to what you can do within the Accelerator Plus. Of course, we'd always look to tailor the deployment based upon your maturity assessment. And actually all of our deployments do start with a lightweight maturity assessment at the very beginning, so that we know where you're at. We understand your areas of strength, areas for development, and we then tailor the deployments based upon those findings. But Emma, I know you're still around for a couple of minutes, but I know you have a hard stop at 12 o'clock. Any final words before we go into the Q&A?
No, I will pop a link in the chat if anybody wants to connect with me directly.
So Emma's had to jump because she's got a full day of doing maturity assessments back to back. But again, everyone that took the time, thank you ever so much. I hope you found it useful. And that is all from me. So thank you.